When I bought the old cottage on the edge of Weatherby Common, I was looking for silence. Not just an absence of noise, but a deep, resonant quiet that would mend the frayed edges of my city-worn nerves. The cottage itself was nothing special, small, slate-roofed with a stubbornly wild garden, but the common beside it was magnificent. A vast expanse of heathland, dotted with ancient gorse bushes and wind-sculpted hawthorns. And right in the middle, stark against the horizon, was a cairn, just a pile of weathered stones, really, but it had a presence. A focal point for the wide, empty spaces. I spent my first few weeks settling in, painting walls, wrestling with the garden. I'd walk the common every evening, the crunch of gravel beneath my boots the only sound, the air crisp and clean. I'd always end up near the cairn, feeling a peculiar pull towards it, a sense of stillness that wasn't entirely peaceful. It started subtly, a fleeting scent of something sweet, like wildflowers, on the windless days. A whisper that seemed to brush past my ear when no one was around. I put it down to imagination, the novelty of solitude. But then, objects in the cottage began to move, not violently, just relocated. My favorite mug would be on the wrong shelf. A book I'd left on the bedside table would appear on the kitchen counter. Once, I found a small, smooth river stone, not from my garden, resting precisely in the center of my pillow. It wasn't menacing, just disorienting, like someone was tidying up, or perhaps leaving a small calling card. I told myself it was faulty memory, that I was just forgetful, but the feeling of being observed, gently, persistently, began to grow. It wasn't a hostile presence, more like a melancholy shadow. One evening, as dusk bled across the common, I was walking towards the cairn. The air grew perceptibly colder as I approached, a sharp, unnatural chill. I stopped a few yards away, my breath clouding. Then I saw it, a faint outline, shimmering in the fading light, near the base of the stones. It was a figure, indistinct but undeniably human-shaped, facing away from me towards the setting sun. It seemed to sway, as if weeping, its form almost transparent. My heart hammered, a frantic drum against my ribs. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. It stayed for a long moment, then slowly, like mist dissolving, it faded entirely. The cold retreated, leaving only the usual evening chill. I stumbled back to the cottage, rationalizing it as fatigue, the play of light. But the image was seared into my mind, a weeping shadow by the cairn. I began to research the common, the cottage, the local history. The internet was sparse, but the village library, surprisingly, had an old ledger, Weatherby Remembrances, dating back over a century. Buried within its faded pages, I found a mention, Elara Vance, lost to the common, 1898. No details, just that stark, mournful entry. And then, a small newspaper clipping, yellowed and brittle, tucked between the pages. It spoke of a young woman, Elara, who had vanished from her home near the common, leaving only a note expressing despair over a lost love. Her family had searched for weeks, but she was never found. The local law suggested she simply walked away into the mist and was claimed by the land. A chill ran down my spine, colder than any wind from the common. My intuition screamed Elara. The cairn, the weeping shadow, the small trinkets, the moved objects, intensified. Now, they weren't just random. I found a faded white ribbon, not mine, tied around the handle of my teacup. Another time, a pressed, dried wildflower, one I recognized from the common, placed on my pillow. They felt like offerings, fragile and sorrowful. I started leaving things out for her. A smooth, polished stone I found, a small, fresh bloom from my garden. I'd place them near the cairn, or sometimes just inside my cottage door, hoping to acknowledge her presence, to perhaps offer some small comfort across the veil. There was a desperate, almost urgent energy to the atmosphere now, a sense that her sorrow was growing, that it was seeking something more than just recognition. The whispers became clearer, though still indistinct, a mournful hum. One night, I woke to the distinct sound of someone sobbing, not inside the cottage, but just outside my open window. It was a low, heartbreaking sound that went straight to my core. I crept to the window and looked out. There, by the edge of my garden, was the shimmering outline again. Clearer this time. She was looking towards the common, towards the cairn, her hands clasped to her chest. As I watched, she slowly, painfully, pointed to the ground near her feet. Not at the common, but at a specific patch of my garden, where the earth was slightly raised, almost like a forgotten mound. Her gesture was filled with an unbearable grief, a longing for something buried, something remembered. And then she faded, leaving behind only the cold night air and the lingering echo of her sorrow. I shivered, understanding dawning like a cold, cruel sunrays. The next morning, armed with a trowel and a heavy heart, I went to that spot in the garden. The earth was stubborn, tangled with old roots, but I dug. The air around me grew heavy, almost oppressive. Deeper I went, until my trowel hit something solid. Not bone, not rock, but wood. Carefully, I cleared the soil. It was a small, ornate wooden box, damp with earth, yet surprisingly well preserved. My hands trembled as I lifted it out. Inside, nestled on a bed of dried velvet, was a silver locket, tarnished with age, and a single, carefully folded, brittle piece of paper. The locket, when I managed to pry it open, contained two tiny, faded photographs, a young woman, surely Ilara, and a kind-faced man in uniform. My heart ached for her, for the forgotten love, for the reason she'd chosen the common. The note, written in delicate, looping script, was addressed to her dearest Arthur. It spoke of their forbidden love, his departure for the war, and her family's insistence she marry another. It ended with a plea for him to find her again, by the cairn, where our true hearts lay buried. She hadn't just vanished, she had waited, hoping he'd return to their secret meeting spot. But he never did, or perhaps he did and never knew where she truly was. Ilara hadn't walked away, she had gone to the cairn and quietly, tragically, ended her vigil there. Her remains were never found, swallowed by the common's vastness, but her final wishes were buried, a secret grief in my garden. I placed the locket and the note back into the box, and then carried it, not to the cairn, but to the spot in my garden where she had pointed. I reburied it, not as a secret, but as a memorial, a final resting place for her love and sorrow. The objects stopped moving, the whispers ceased, the air in the cottage and on the common no longer felt heavy with a borrowed grief. Only the quiet remained. It was a silence, finally, of peace. Thank you for listening. If this story found you in the dark, subscribe and turn on notifications. A new tale waits every night.